Hi guys, Chris at the Ultimate Recycler. This ute load and trailer load of treasures I found recently on an American picking style afternoon treasure hunting in an old machinery shed. So I'll put the link up now. Go and have a look at it. It's we had a lot of fun, found some good gear. This video is part 2 of the appraisals of what we found. And here's the list of appraisals I did in part 1 of appraising what we scored from that shed fossick, and if you want to see that video, I'll put the link up now. This is part 2 now, and we'll go through some of the other stuff we got from the deal. And here's what we'll look at in this part. What I'll do is I'll go through the items one at a time and explain why I grabbed it, what's required to make it saleable, and what I think it's worth. I'll give you a bit of an appraisal, plus any history or info I can think of as I'm going through it. So for this video, we'll start with these two enameled light shades. These have been quite popular for a fairly long time now. The industrial sort of look is popular. These are quite heavy, original enamel shades. You can see that they're extremely dirty, but I think the enamel's pretty good on that one. It should wash up quite well. And as with all my stuff, I'll give you a quick look at them cleaned up before we move to the next one. This one has got some chipping to the enamel there. It looks like some holes were drilled and something was mounted on it. But anyway, look, they were always worth grabbing, those things. Whether I sell them just as shades or whether I actually wire up a light fitting and have them hanging off a ladder and on in my shop, I do that sometimes. It gives a really good effect and it seems to make them very easy to sell. I would think, depending how they clean up, I would think the smaller one would probably make $30 or $40, particularly if I put a light fitting in it. And the larger one, probably about the same because it is a little damaged, but it does depend on how they clean up. When you're out picking, sometimes you just take a punt, you just go on a gut feel. Now this is a pressure cooker. I don't know much about it. It's not the sort of normal one that I see. The brand is Roy Lagostina, and if I look underneath, it's made in Italy. I don't think it's overly old, but the good thing is that it's in great condition. There appears to be no damage other than it's just rather dusty. It should wash up really good. The pressure relief valve's still there. So I'm going to do a bit of checking on this one. Again, taking a punt when you're at picking like this, it's really no risk, because whether I threw this in the load or not, I was still going to offer the same amount of money. And things like this, if they turn out to be either broken, unusable, unsaleable, or just not worth the effort, it's either stainless steel, or this one's stainless steel, I think. It's got a cast aluminium base perhaps. So there's some value scrap metal wise anyway, absolutely last resort. But I just had a hunch that this would be worth grabbing and cleaning up. So I'll do some checking on this one before I offer you a price. So it really cleaned up well, as you can see. And I found quite a few on eBay that sold, even new, up to $150 odd. So we'll go 50. Next, also along the lines of cooking, or at least the kitchen stove. You may remember, if you've seen my original picking video, that I found this in a very dark side shed, and it's a stovetop hot water tank. It would have sat on the side of a wood-fired kitchen stove. It's probably copper, I'd say it is, just looking at that pink under nickel-plated copper. It's quite an early one. The old swivel style tap, and that still moves. I did notice though that the back handle has been broken. It's probably a cast brass or something, but that won't really detract. I couldn't find the lid when I was looking, but I reckon I've got a small teapot lid that would suit that. But otherwise, yes, it's in quite good order. Doesn't appear to be corroded, so I'll give that a good scrub up. I can test it. I'll just make sure the tap works fine, and it's a great piece for the kitchen room. Good classic sort of farm country kitchen type appliance, I would probably think, if I find a suitable lid, I would probably think I'd have $50 on that. So I was pretty happy to find that. Again, I would have grabbed it even if it was badly damaged, just purely because the copper's worth grabbing, because it does have a fair bit of weight to it. Now I've got a couple of tins here. Well, this one's not a tin. Well, I think it is, but it's paint and it's full and it's sealed. And I reckon that's the oldest can of paint I've ever found. Manufactured in Glasgow for Alexandra Ferguson Pty Ltd. And it's Rickshaw. Now I don't know anything about it, but the label is just so cool, and the fact that it's still sealed. I'll gently clean the top up to see what that label says. But it looks like to open it you've got to peel off a tin sort of sealing strip. Here we go. So it's still totally sealed. There's a guarantee on the back. I don't suppose the guarantee still applies now, but yeah, pretty interesting. So I'm going to very carefully clean that up, because the label is just a paper label, but the graphics there are really cool. And whilst there's no value at all in the contents, it's kind of nice that it's still sealed. It doesn't look like it's in danger of rusting through. The bottom's actually pretty good. They probably made cans much better then than they do now. So I'll clean that up carefully, and that'll be a beautiful display item. I have no idea what it's worth, other than the fact that I think it's a cool display piece, and I would probably just pluck a figure out of the air and say, I don't know, $30, and I reckon it'd sell. So we'll carefully clean that one up. I might spray it with some clear lacquer just to protect the label a bit. Alright, a more recognisable tin now, what you find in sheds. A nice Esso multi-purpose grease tin. The thing to look for on tins straight away is whether they're in metric or imperial. This one's 3 pounds or 5 pounds. I think it's 5. Can't quite read that. But the important thing is that dates it. You find them in kilograms or in litres, and you know then that they're 70s or more recent. This one's earlier. The paint looks in pretty good condition. There doesn't appear to be much fading. The good thing about grease tins is that the grease tends to protect the paint. And I'm going to wash that up in petrol very carefully. I reckon that'll come up really bright and vibrant. And I'll do a bit of checking to see what these ones sell at. I would suggest it's probably a $40 tin, just off the top of my head. So we'll clean that one up, and I'll do a bit of checking on that one. And the last tin here isn't quite as interesting, but it does have some good graphics on it, and it is nice and clear. It is in pounds, so that's a pre-metric measurement, and it looks like it's a hand cleaner, so that's why it was in the workshop, I guess. It's an Australian made tin. Flemington, Victoria was the company that made the chemical. So a bit dented up there, and we could probably pop the lid off. The lid looks like just a paint can lid, and I should be able to pop that dent out. It should wash up quite well, be a nice display item. A little bit of paint loss under there, but look, I haven't seen that particular tin before, but I would be thinking it'd be a $20–25 tin cleaned up. Now, I didn't think too much about this old computer when I grabbed it out of the shed. I was just thinking, oh, old computers are fun to pull apart. The e-waste scrappers will enjoy this one. However, upon checking, this one's a bit too historic to scrap. In computer terms, this one's positively ancient. We've got a model 30286 IBM 286. I bet you a lot of you these days, young folks these days, wouldn't even know what a 286 is. And the IBM keyboard, it's actually really massive and quite heavy, is a Model M, and it's dated 1990. And that's pretty early as far as personal computers go. So I did a bit of checking on this, and I certainly won't be scrapping it. The keyboard seemed to bring for at minimum 100, up to about 200. I saw them and they were selling. And the actual system itself, well, let's have a look inside. Right, I really don't know what this is worth. It's complete. It's rather dusty, but it looks in pretty good order. I don't know if it'll boot up at all. I might try it one day. It looks like there's some sticks of RAM in there. There's a hard drive. And can we see what size it is? 30 meg. 30 meg hard drive. That's just tiny. I like the way the on and off switch works here. Lever at the front operates a linkage to a switch at the back. How cool is that? So I'm going to put this into storage, because let's face it, these things aren't going to become more common, and vintage computer hardware is becoming more and more collectible the older it gets. So I'll find the battery on the main motherboard and pop that out, and then it can go into my container for long-term storage, and one day it might be worth a bit more. I'm sure it'll be better than inflation. But as far as values for this this deal goes, I don't know. I think we could be pretty safe in suggesting that I'd actually get my money back on this deal. I'd get my $250 back on this item alone, and I certainly didn't consider that when I picked it out of the shed. I'm not sure if there was a modem there, not a modem, a monitor in the shed or not. I didn't see one, but I'm pretty happy to find this. So we'll put this away for safekeeping. And here's a couple of metal objects that most people had walked past at this shed. This one I really like. It's probably Edwardian by the style on the knob there. Brass or copper fittings to this little tin box. It probably measures just over 12 inches along and probably about 8 to 10 inches across. It's got a hinged lid. It's rusted out inside, as you can see, but it had been sitting out beside a shed in the weather for a long time. But whether someone grows plants in it or puts a new bottom in it, it's got a handle on the back, so I'm not sure of what its original use was. Doesn't matter to me. It's a beautiful piece of rusty metal. The hinges alone would sell, but I'm going to put $15 on that just as it is. Someone will grab it with some vision. Who knows? Grow plants in it, put it in the garden, make a letterbox out of it, whatever. And it's just a matter of seeing value in stuff that other people don't, and it makes my shop interesting. This one a lot of people had walked past as well, and it's a fuel tank, I guess, or a reservoir for something, but it's nice heavy gel. It's good solid, not light gauge at all, quite thick. It has a bung at the bottom. Doesn't appear to be rusted out. Being gel, I guess that's protected it. Has a lid that a cap that fits on nicely. It looked fairly clean inside. So I don't have a use for it, but I saw a bit of value in it, and I reckon if I can see value, someone else will. I would think anyone that's restoring old engines or old pieces of machinery and wants a little of an oil reservoir or a fuel tank would see value in that. I'm going to put $20 on that. It's a bit, sometimes these things valuing, it's a bit like price doesn't really matter. You've got to find someone that wants it. I could have a $1 on it, and if people didn't want it, they still wouldn't buy it. But the person that does want it, $1, $10, $20, probably doesn't matter. If he's got a use, $20 is nothing. So I'll put those in the shop and we'll see how we go. Now this cute little table, I believe is called a Gypsy table, and I think they date to late Victorian times, 1890s perhaps, thereabouts. It's just a little side table or a lamp table, I guess you'd call it, and it's quite a nice design. Typical Victorian sort of finials in there, turned wood. Now this one is really in surprisingly good condition, having come out of a shed, because quite often when they're sitting in the dirt, the feet rot off or they get borer in them or something happens and the timber starts to decay, but this one's pretty good. The only major problem this one's got is the top is very curved. The top, I think, has copped a bit of sun and it's dried right out. It's cracked a little bit on the edges, so it's typical shrinkage from heating. And what you get with bare timber when it's not sealed or painted is that the side that cops the heat tends to dry, and the other side, the underside, doesn't dry as much, and therefore the shrinkage causes it to curl. So to counter that, I saw this little trick quite a long time ago, and I've used it with a fair bit of success. What we're going to do is we're going to leave it upside down overnight on the grass. Now there should be enough moisture in the lawn to sort of just soak into the timber a little bit. The timber will kind of draw it in. If the lawn's super dry, maybe you could water it a few hours earlier just so there's some dampness. And because the top won't be in contact with any dampness, unless you've got a dewy night, in which case it won't work, but it's quite warm here and it's going to be quite warm through the night. So I'll check it in the morning, and hopefully the moisture soaks up on the other side a little bit, expands that side. This side won't change, and therefore the expansion will cause the curve to hopefully disappear, or at least reduce somewhat. So I'll check it tomorrow and see what it looks like, and we'll give you an appraisal on the value then. So I left this little table outside overnight on the grass, and then it was better this morning, but then I left it throughout most of the day when it was sunny, so the sun got on the back of it and it shrunk the back, expanded the top, and look at that, it's actually just slightly gone the other way, but it's almost perfectly flat. So I'm very happy with that, considering how much it was bowed. What I'm going to do now is just put a little bit of beeswax, rub a bit of that into the top, and it'll seal it from moisture getting in and bowing it or drying it out, and hopefully it should stay nice and flat. And one other thing I've done is I've put a piece of hardwood underneath. You'll notice I've used original early flathead screws, and I will just bevel off the ends of that and stain it a little bit so it fits in. But the idea there is to just give it some reinforcing and to keep that top flat, and we'll keep it out of the sun as well, because that's what did the damage in the first place. So there's the final table, and I think I'll put 65 on it in the shop. Okay, just to finish off this appraisal video, we'll go through a few small items here. The first one's a Lanes box, Australian made. Lanes were made hardware or door locks and that sort of thing. This one was 12 dozen pair of 3.5 inch steel bolts. I guess there was some hardware used in door locks or hinges or something. The box itself is pretty good. There's no rot, there's no insect damage. A little bit of damage to the corner. It looks like it's probably been chewed on by a rodent. But it's a quite serviceable little box, and I do grab any boxes with advertising on them. They're just popular with regards to collectors, but also people that just want to use the things and have a bit of character. Good Australian box. I'll just give that a wash up, and I would expect to get $15 to $20 for that one in the shop, no problems. Alright, a couple of tins here, actually from the same company. Plaistow was a Perth, a Western Australian company. They made sweets, chocolates, quite a range of things, possibly biscuits too by the look of that tin. And there's a vintage picture of Perth. Bet you that's changed a lot now. This one's got native Australian flowers around the sides. It's in pretty good condition. This one's got some Australian natives and some animals as well, flora and fauna, with the original foil type label. Now you'll notice it's in grams, so these aren't overly old. I would suggest probably 70s. This company started just before 1900, and they went through to about 1990 when they were taken over by Nestle. But good Australian tins, they'll both clean up fine. They're really just dusty. There's no rust. Nothing really detracts from them. So good Aussie tins, I would expect probably 10 to 15 on a large one. And this one with the kookaburra and other natives on it, I think I'd get 20 for that. Moving along, teapots. An aluminium teapot in pretty good condition. Aluminium is very soft and they quite often dent very easily, but this one's good. I do sell a surprisingly high number of teapots. Not sure why. It could actually be because people are a bit more environmentally conscious now, and I did a video a while back on tea bags and they actually contain microplastics. A lot of the brands do anyway. So some people are going back to loose leaf tea. I also sell these to campers. So there's no damage to that. I grabbed it because I know they sell quick. Easy $10 in the shop for that one. And along the kitchenalia theme, this old flour sifter. Nice classic retro styling, probably 1960s. This one is a little bit rough, but it actually still works. And it probably just needs a little bit of a straighten there. I'll wash it up. And great display piece. I can't imagine a lot of people actually wanting to use it to sift flour, but kitchenalia displays are popular. There's probably $15 I'd suggest, because the artwork's in pretty good condition. So 15 on that one. And the last piece isn't Australian. I think this would be an English vase. Very 1950s. It's just got a painted finish rather than a glaze. But a nice hand painted scene on the front there. And I only grabbed this because that painted scene was in such good condition. Well, I often find these 50s era vases where the paint starts to flake off and they look quite messy, and I wouldn't have touched it if that was the case, but this will just need a wash up. I'll be a little bit careful over the painted area, but I would expect to get probably $15 to $20 on that one, because it's a nice 50s look and with that hand painted artwork there. So we'll go 15 perhaps on that one. So there you go, that finishes up the number of appraisals I'll do in this part. I'll give you a look at the price list. And that concludes part 2 of the appraisals from this deal. Here's the list, prices as mentioned. The computer of course is a bit of a guess, so I suspect that might do better than that, and as I mentioned, I'm going to stack it away for now. It's going to be a bit of a nest egg perhaps. All the other stuff priced out as mentioned, $710. Add that to the list from part 1, gives it a total of $16.85. Certainly very, very good profits on this deal, and I've still got a lot more to go through. So just demonstrates that we are getting some reasonable quality stuff, lots of quantity, and making very good profits. Hopefully you're learning a little bit about valuations and what I consider when I'm out looking and out picking. So I'll keep going with this series. Look out for part 3. I'll put a link at the end of this video when I get part 3 done, so you can follow the playlist on. Thanks for watching. Catch you next time.